Good evening. It's your favorite vampire podcast host, Lena Nazari. Before we get to tonight's episode, I just wanted to talk to you about something. Recently, I got to talk to the amazing Jack and Shane Townsend about a bunch of different things, but most importantly, about the movie that they are creating. This movie is a vampire romance, but it's not like anything you've ever seen before. It is fantasy inspired, and it is inspired by some of our favorite movies, The Neverending Story, Labyrinth, Legend, Stardust, all those wonderful movies that we love so much. They would like to bring that back in their way. You can go right now to their Kickstarter. There's a link in the video description. It is going on until August 5th, and you can be a part of this campaign to help them bring to us the movie that they would like to bring, to honor the world that they have created, not just for themselves, but for all of the fans of the Vampire Jack universe. Go check it out, and thank you for joining.
I couldn't. I love the night. That's the only time I feel really alive.
That's what David wanted.
Blood, I was to find, was a necessity as well.
A vampire in love with a slayer. It's rather poetic. I am the monster the breathing men would kill. I am Dracula.
Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down, and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I am your host, Lena Nazari. Just go to lenanazari.com or go to Instagram and follow The Beautiful Dead podcast. It's really not that complicated. Take about 30 seconds and it's free. So make sure if you're watching me on YouTube, you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. If you're listening to me on the podcast version, make sure that you're following because I have so many cool things coming up. I cannot wait for spooky season. I am so excited. Not just because I'm over this heat, but because I love spooky season and I go all out and I have huge, huge plans. So make sure you're following me so you don't miss anything. This is the last episode of July, so make sure you're going to my social media or you're part of my fanged family so you know what I'm doing in August. And then you're going to get to see the announcements on who is joining me this September and October. And trust me, it's good. I'm very excited. All right, tonight's vampire tea, obviously, is Brides of the Damned. And I brought back my Buffy mug this week because it's so big and I love having extra tea. So Buffy is back with us. All right, if you have never listened to this podcast or watched this YouTube channel, massive spoiler alerts. I will ruin everything. I'm about to read a full synopsis and it tells you everything from beginning to end, and then I'm going to start breaking down the vampires, so if you're new to us, you have been warned. And of course tonight we are talking about the 1960 Brides of Dracula. I'm very excited. You see my choker, my red lips, because I'm tapping into my whole Dracula Brides feeling here while we talk about this evening. So let's go ahead and do it. Summary. The Brides of Dracula from 1960. En route to taking up position in Transylvania, French schoolteacher Marianne Danielle is abandoned at a village inn by her coach driver. Ignoring the warnings of the locals, she accepts the offer of the Baroness Meinster to spend the night at her castle because what could go wrong? The Baroness's son, Baron Meinster, is said to be insane and kept confined. After sneaking into his quarters to meet him, she is shocked to find the Baron is chained up to the wall. Ladies, giant red flag. You should probably run. He says that his mother has usurped his rightful lands and pleads for Marianne's help. She steals the key to his chain from the Baroness's bedroom and frees him. The Baron later kills his mother and drinks her blood. Marianne flees into the night upon seeing this, while the castle servant Greta blames the dead Baroness for having allowed the Baron to be turned into a vampire by Dracula. After chaining the Baron, the Baroness has been luring girls to feed him. Despite knowing the evil he intends for the village, Greta remains loyal to the Baron. Exhausted, Marianne is found by Dr. Van Helsing, because isn't that convenient? The following morning. She does not remember the previous night. He escorts her to the school where she is to be employed. Van Helsing then reaches the village inn and finds that there is a funeral in progress. A young girl has been found dead in the woods with wounds upon her throat. I'm sure it's nothing. Father Stepnik, who has requested Van Helsing's presence, joins the doctor in his investigation, and the two try to dissuade the girl's father from burying her. Unfortunately, he does not listen, and she becomes a vampire. Stepnik and Van Helsing go into the cemetery that night, only to find Greta encouraging the girl to rise from her grave. The men try to stop them, but Greta holds them off, allowing the girl to flee. Van Helsing goes to the castle and discovers the Baroness, now risen as a vampire herself, and the Baron. After a brief scuffle, the Baron flees, abandoning his mother. Knowing that the transformation was the Baron's revenge on his mother for locking him up, Van Helsing takes pity on her and kills her with a wooden stake the next morning. The Baron, meanwhile, visits Marianne and asks her to marry him. She accepts, much to the envy of her roommate Gina. The Baron later appears in Gina's room and drains her of her blood. The next day, Van Helsing inspects Gina's body and orders that it be placed in a horse stable under constant vigilance. That night, Marianne guards the corpse. She is with the stable keeper, Severin, who is eventually killed by a vampire bat. A vampirized Gina then rises from her coffin. While approaching Marianne, she reveals that the Baron is hiding in the old mill. Van Helsing appears and saves Marianne from being bitten by Gina and flees. Reluctantly, Marianne tells Van Helsing what Gina told her. He goes to the old mill and finds the Baron's coffin. He is soon confronted by both of the Meinster's brides and wards them off with his cross. Greta, who is still human, wrestles it away from him, only to trip and plummet from the rafters to her death. The Baron then arrives, subdues Van Helsing, and bites him, inflicting him with vampirism before leaving. After waking up, Van Helsing heats a metal tool in a brazier, cauterizes his wound, and pours holy water on it, and then the wound disappears. Baron Meinster, meanwhile, abducts Marianne and brings her to the mill, intending to vampirize her as well. As the Baron attempts to hypnotize her to make her compliant to his will, Van Helsing throws holy water at his face, which sears him like acid. The Baron kicks over the brazier of hot coals, starting a fire, and runs outside as the brides make their escape. Van Helsing runs to the sails and moves them to form a shadow of a cross over Baron Meinster, who is killed by exposure to the symbol. Van Helsing then comforts Marianne as the mill burns. All right, let me take a sip of my tea and let's talk about it. Vampiric references and crossovers. So, Dracula is mentioned very early, and then he is not brought up again. But it is explained that his followers live on, which I think means, the people he has turned. Now, as far as crossovers, I have decided when it comes to Hammer films, you just can't, right? Because Hammer films are sort of like an incestuous bunch. It's like an Adam Sandler movie. You're going to see the same 6 actors. Peter Cushing, of course, plays Van Helsing in this, and he plays Van Helsing in I don't even know how many other vampire movies. And then Christopher Lee had played Dracula prior to this movie, and they did ask him to return, and he's like, no, I don't want to be typecasted, which is hilarious because he'll go on to play it like 9 times. I think he is, I know he is, the actor to have played Dracula the most times. So there's no point in talking about crossovers because like everybody in these Hammer films has done a ton of other Hammer films. But you know what? $20 is $20. If you get paid to play Dracula, do it, buddy. Do it. Okay, let's break down the universe of the Brides of Dracula in 1960. Relationship to humans. So it appears that the locals of Transylvania know that vampires exist. But any human who's coming from the outside, I mean, except for Van Helsing, who knows for sure, most of the people are kind of unaware that vampires exist. So Marianne and Gina, they don't think about vampires. Meanwhile, the vampires walk amongst them, feed off of them. Sometimes their mom brings girls to them to eat for dinner because, we can't say no to our sons, God forbid. Some humans protect the vampires during the day, like Greta, either because of devotion or being under the vampire's hypnotism. I think in Greta's case, she just couldn't say no to the Baroness or the Baron. Codependency, am I right? All right. Relationship to animals. So we hear the wolves howl sometimes. It's not clear if the vampires are affecting the wolves, but I thought I would mention it because they do it several times. And then, of course, the vampires can turn into bats. Appearance. So they appear human until they vamp out. And according to Van Helsing, this is a direct quote, you can recognize a vampire because they are thin and have an air of hunger about them. Dude, so do models. That doesn't mean models are vampires. Such a weird line. But when they vamp out, you see the fangs and they're very pale, especially the young ladies are very pale. All right, fangs. 2 sharp, retractable canines, as they should be. Blood. Yep, they drink blood. Food. We never see the vampires eat or drink. I'm pretty sure it's an all-blood diet. These are kind of classic vampires, as they should be. Somehow all of the girls happen to have a white diaphanous gown, which is perfect because now everybody knows that they are vampire brides. Sunlight. Again, OG vampires. Thank goodness. They cannot be in the sun. Sleep. They sleep in coffins. Now, I don't know if the girls have to return to the coffin they were buried in or if they can just pick any old coffin. That's really never addressed. Oh no, I hit the mic again. Sorry to the podcast listeners. All I know is that the Baron has a coffin that they found and the girls rose from coffins. That's what I know for sure. Holy items. Yes, crosses repel them and burn them, and holy water burns them like acid. Rules. So it is mentioned that they have to return to coffins before the rooster crows at sunrise. And again, do they have to return to the coffin they were buried in? Can they snuggle up in the Baron's coffin with him? I actually don't know that. Garlic is protection against vampires in this world, and they do not cast a reflection. Powers. When we first see the Baron, as mentioned before, he is chained. Ladies, if you come across a handsome man who's chained to a wall in a castle, it's probably not the beast. It's not going to turn out well for you. You should probably walk away. But he's chained, so that tells us either he is not strong enough to break chains or the chains are made of silver so they can bind him. I don't know which one, but we do know that he's chained and he needs the chains unlocked for him. He can hypnotize and control humans' wills, and they can transform into bats. How are they made? So this is interesting. I love you, Van Helsing, because you always just explain it to me so clearly. Van Helsing explains that vampirism originated in an ancient pagan religion as a way to fight Christianity. It is passed on by the vampire biting the victim and drinking from them. He never explains how pagan cults managed to create vampires in the first place or why, but I guess it doesn't matter. And he calls the vampire bite the seal of Dracula. I thought that was pretty sick. Instead of being like, oh, you got a little bite on your neck, you could be like, it is the seal of Dracula. I'm going to start using that anytime I see a bug bite. The victim is drained and dies and then rises sometime later as a vampire. Caveat though, if you are bitten by a vampire and you catch it in time and you cauterize it and pour holy water on it, then that will stop you from turning. And we saw that, something very similar to that, I want to say in Supernatural, I think. Let me know in the comments. I know there's something where if you pour holy water on it. Oh, in Supernatural, they had to do that whole concoction that they had to drink before they fed on their first human. So it's not Supernatural, it's something else. What did we watch where if you pour enough holy... Oh, Blade. It was Blade, wasn't it? All right, let me know in the comments. You guys will know. Heartbeat and breathing. This is never addressed, but seeing as how they die and are buried and then climb from their graves, I'm gonna guess the inside parts aren't active. That's my professional opinion as a doctorate prepared nurse as well as a vampire expert. How do they die? Staked through the heart or burning with fire. And then the Baron dies by being caught in the shadow of the cross. Are they good or are they bad? They are the bad guys of the story. There's no getting around that. They are the bad guys, and Van Helsing is the good guy. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. Trope I love. I love a good vampire building his vampire harem trope where he's like, I want that lady and that lady and that lady and that lady. And he's just like collecting brides like baseball cards. That's terrible. It's very anti-feminist of me, but I love that trope. He had 2 brides already, but he was going for a 3rd. All right. Went after his fiance's roommate. You don't think that's going to be awkward for them at some point? Yeah. Tropes I hate. You guys know this. I am not a fan of Saved by Faith. And when the Baron dies by being caught in the shadow of the cross, I'm just like, oh my gosh. We saw that in Ganja and Hess. I hated it in Ganja and Hess. I hated it in this one. Like, he is the direct descendant of Dracula. But if you just catch him in the shadow of the cross, he falls down dead. Like, boo. All right, let's do the ratings. How scary or evil are the vampires of the Brides of Dracula? All right, the Baron is the direct descendant of Dracula himself, so that is nothing to scoff at. They turn into bats, they drink blood, but they are bound by the sun. They have to return to a coffin by dawn, and they can be held captive by a chain on their ankle. So that's like not super impressive, right? Once in the coffin and resting, they're completely helpless, but they do have human servants that will protect them while they sleep. And the mother makes it clear that obviously they can hold on to some kind of morality because she gets turned and she's like, just kill me. I kind of messed up. I spoiled my son. Now he's kind of a dick. And now he turned me into a vampire and it really sucks. So can you just kill me? So obviously you can hold on to some type of morality should you want to, but she's the only one that we see like that. And then on the flip side, the Baron turns his mother into a vampire just for revenge, just because he's kind of a douche. So she's been bringing him local girls to feed on, and he's like, well, you chained me up, so I'm gonna turn you into a vampire and make you hate yourself. Which is super shitty. So that's dark. They're repelled by garlic and holy water. If you just hold a cross-shaped object like up to a light, you can kill them. So they're not particularly fast or strong, but they can mesmerize you. I don't know, these vampires just kind of feel mid. They're like not the greatest, but not the worst. So 5 out of 10 stakes to the heart for scariness and evil. Now, how sexy or alluring are the vampires of the Brides of Dracula? So clearly the Baron loves the ladies. He is unchained for like a day and he's already made 2 brides and he's working on a 3rd. He's clearly charming because he proposes to this school teacher during their second ever conversation. The first conversation, he's chained to a wall. The second one, he shows up at her workplace and he's like, marry me. And she's like, yes, totally yes, I will do this. So he's got to have some kind of charm. And then her roommate is like, I wish it was me. Says it right to her face. Looks right at her roommate's face and says, I wish your fiance was marrying me instead of you. So he's got some kind of charisma. Now, I don't know if that's because he's got some special allure or he's just really handsome and he's a baron and he's got a ton of money and a castle. Kind of could be that, right? Now, he says he's only kissed her on the hand. And that could be either a lack of a libido because he doesn't care about sex, he just wants blood, or just because it was that time, I'm not sure. He is creating a harem, but I don't know necessarily if that's for sex or he just wants to have a bunch of hot ladies around him because that's what his mentor Dracula did. Maybe he saw Dracula do it and he's like, oh, well, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to have 3 brides just like him, and then I can be the new Dracula. I don't know. So I'm gonna give this a tie. They're kind of mid in the scariness category. They're kind of mid in the sexiness category.
You're mid. Oh! Round of applause for your opinion. I don't give a fuck.
So yeah, that feels good to me. I feel like a tie is perfect. So 5 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure. What are my thoughts? It's been a little while since we've done a classic, okay? So of course there's always like a little bit of pressure when you're covering a classic because they're classics for a reason. There are some massive plot holes in this story. I will say that. That being said, the Hammer films are a must for any vampire fan, and I'll tell you why. There are a ton of them, first off. But because of the Hammer films, we have Christopher Lee's version of Dracula, which I mean is historical. And these Hammer films are a very big reason that we have the vampires we do today. Because they were a big part in transitioning vampires from monsters to sort of like sensual creatures that could walk amongst us. The Hammer films really amped up the sexy in vampires. We would not have Eric Northman or David from the Lost Boys, the sexy, charming, but very dangerous vampires that we love today, without these Hammer films, and I stand by that. So yes, there are plot holes. Yes, it's like cheesy scenes. It is what it is. That being said, if you are a vampire fan, a vampire fan, or just a movie aficionado, and you haven't seen a Hammer film, you really, really, really need to. I think that it's just a part of our history. You have to watch it, and you can see the way that they amp up the sensuality and the way that they really highlight sort of the sexiness of the vampire and how that transitioned into what we had in the 80s and 90s and so on. So, as a matter of fact, that is going to be our August theme. In August, we're going to do 4 more Hammer films. You need to go check my Instagram to find out which 4 I'm going to be doing so that you can watch ahead of being back next week. Next week is the beginning of August, so we will be talking about my tarot for the month and what happened to me in July, and I'm going to start giving you some hints about what you can expect in spooky season, because before you know it, you're going to watch those 4 Hammer films with me in August, and then boom, pumpkin spice lattes, hay rides, spooky season. I'm so freaking excited. So please, go watch any Hammer film, I don't care, or go check my Instagram to see which ones I'll be talking about. In the meantime, I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.